Ballast water helps a ship sail from one port to the next at the most stable level in the water column. If a ship is taking on cargo and before it leaves a port, it's not at the most stable level in the water column, the ship has these enormous tanks that are built into the ship that are specifically designed to take in seawater from the surrounding port. That then will bring the ship down to a level within the water that makes the ship most stable. When the ship then is in the next port, the ship may be loading cargo again, and then some ballast water may need to be discharged. Well, you're now taking water that you brought from another part of the world to a different part of the world.
So what we test is ballast water treatment systems. Over the last 20 or 30 years, folks have come to the realization that invasive species are being carried by marine vessels in their ballast water. And regulations have come into place internationally, nationally, and locally to try and abate this spread of invasive species by treating the ballast water on the ships. So what we do is we install ballast water treatment systems on board, emerging technologies or technologies that are looking for type approval by U.S. Coast Guard or international administrations. We bring on the water, we treat it with the system, we discharge it, and we characterize the effect or the effectiveness of that treatment system.
When preparing for a test, there's certain levels or certain challenges that we need to meet as a testing facility in order for a test to be considered valid. So before we do an uptake, we look at the ambient water, meaning the water that's right here on the ship. We do counts of organisms, so zooplankton, phytoplankton. We look at potentially augmenting the water for certain chemical characteristics in the water that we're required to have in there to properly test the system. Once we know that that's all set, we will start an uptake event where we are sending water. We'll do a count, we'll sample the water, we'll pull out those organisms that are being regulated, so zooplankton, phytoplankton, bacteria, and we will count them to see how many are going into the ballast tank, and then that water gets treated, and then after a certain period or holding time, we then discharge that water and do the exact same sampling and count how many organisms in those same classes are coming out. And in that way you can kind of gauge the efficacy of these systems and how many organisms are being reduced.
So the hope is that by reducing these organism concentrations that are carried by marine vessels as a vector for species transport, by reducing these concentrations significantly, we can also reduce this vector of spreading invasive species across the planet. If there's 60,000, give or take, ships across the world carrying ballast across the oceans, and we can reduce that down by 4 orders of magnitude to effectively 6 ships, one can see it might be a pretty impressive reduction in that vector for invasive species spread.
The Navy League has been gracious enough to recognize our Golden Bear facility to help with environmental efforts. And we are very, very pleased to accept the honor from the Navy League and to be recognized at the ceremony in Washington, D.C.
So the Michelson Award, I think we all really appreciate being recognized. It's nice to do work just for the good itself, but it never hurts to have somebody tell you that you're doing the right thing as well. So, educating the next generation of mariners is really it's what we're all here for. So I think it's an absolute plus and a value added to having a test facility, seeing research, seeing technologies advance, and having our students be involved and aware of that as it happens.